My name is Carrie Leatherman. I'm WMU's Natural Sciences Librarian, and I am here with my colleagues Diana Sachs, our Health and Human Services Librarian, and Ed Eckel, our Engineering Librarian. So what we're going to do today, we are going to overshoot the slides. Come back. There we go. We are going to cover several topics related to doing a literature review. Up on the screen right now is an outline of what we're going to be covering. We're going to be first covering the idea of what is a literature review. Next, we're going to talk about how to define a literature review's question and scope. Then we'll talk about where to search for the literature for your lit review. Next, we'll review effective search techniques for finding the literature. Also, we'll cover how to keep track of your searches. We'll also cover how to determine how relevant the material you found is for your lit review. We'll also talk about when is your literature review actually complete. And throughout this workshop, we're going to have a two-part hands-on exercise that'll give you a chance to actually use and practice with some of these skills we're talking about in the workshop. Also, at the very end of the workshop, we're going to invite you to take a very brief feedback survey. It's online. The survey is about how the workshop, worked for you. We want to make sure that these workshops are relevant, and one of the best ways to do that is get feedback from you all. So please, we'd appreciate any that you can give us. All right, and moving on. There we go. So what is a, oh, pardon me. There we go. I am having some technical difficulties. There we go. So what is a literature review? A literature review, just by the definition you can see up on the screen, is both a process and a product. As a process, it's when you search databases for the most current and relevant literature that has been written about a particular research topic. Okay, and we're going to talk about how to actually search and find that relevant literature. A literature review also, though, is a product. It's an actual write-up, a written synthesis of what is known about a research topic, what has been written about in the scholarly literature on that topic. It provides supporting evidence for some sort of a thesis. Okay, so in this workshop, we're going to talk about literature reviews as if we are if you all are working on a large-scale literature review, like a master's thesis or a doctorate dissertation literature review. A lot of what we're going to talk about applies to smaller scale literature reviews that you would perhaps do for like a semester term paper, but our assumption is that you're going to be doing a thesis or dissertation. One other thing I want to mention about, what is a literature review? A literature review is meant to be comprehensive. What you're trying to do in a literature review is finding all of the scholarly articles and literature that addresses your particular research question, and you want to make sure that you understand the context of how your research question for your thesis or dissertation fits within the existing literature. You want to be able to contextualize your research within the scholarly conversation in your field, and that's what a literature review is going to be doing. Okay, so, oh, pardon me. My slides are jumping around quite a bit here, and I don't know why. Let's back up. Okay, so define your research question. Once you're defining the research question, what sort of question your thesis or dissertation is trying to pose an answer to, you want to think about a couple of things. And they're listed up on the slide here. What you'll want to think about are aspects of the research question related to methodology. What sort of methodology will the study or the research you're doing actually have? Will it be, for example, qualitative versus quantitative research? And that really depends a lot on the field you're in, the standards that your particular discipline has. Another aspect of your research question you want to address is your study population. For example, if you are working in health and human services, Is your research going to involve human subjects? Will your particular research involve populations like teenagers or the elderly or males versus females? Another thing you'll want to think about if your discipline, for example, deals with non-human organisms, perhaps in biology, will you be dealing with certain plant or animal species? Is there a certain organism that you're focusing on? Another thing, if you're working in a discipline, say like engineering or other physical sciences that perhaps deal with a certain type of material, like alloys or chemicals, what are the specific materials that your research will be involving? Okay. Another aspect of your literature review that you'll want to think about is the scope. And by that I mean, how broad of a search do you need to conduct in order to address your literature review? Listed up on the slide are a few aspects, things like the date range. What is the date range of the publications or other materials that you'll need to be working with? Do you need very current literature, maybe the past couple of years that's been published within your discipline? Is it something a little bit more historic? Do you need a survey over the past 100 years of studies or other literature been written about this subject? What is your subject area within the literature that you want to cover? What are inclusion or exclusion criteria? For example, if you're studying autism in adults, you want to make sure that when you're looking at the literature, you may want to exclude any publications that have to do with children with autism and focus only on your adult population. You want to think about document types. What type of documents will you need to cover your literature review? Is your particular discipline focused on published research articles, preprints, perhaps like in physics, in scholarly journals in general, books, other types of documents? It's important to think about what you're going to be looking for within these different types of scopes. All right, so having covered then some of the basics about how to define your research question, how to define the scope of your research and your literature review, let's go ahead and actually take a minute and do an activity. You'll see up on the website, and perhaps Ed or Diana can actually pop that into the chat.
I got it in chat.
Thank you. What we'll do, we're going to pull up this Google document, and I can actually go ahead and pull that up right here and share my screen with you. There we go. What I'd like everyone to go ahead and do for, say, the next 2 minutes is fill out columns A, B, and C for your particular topic or research question. This doesn't have to be something that you're committing to for the rest of your academic career. If this is something just to be able to practice kind of brainstorming a topic, what kind of scope criteria might be applicable for you. Go ahead and just fill that in, do a little brainstorming. We'll come back to this document that's up right now and actually do a few more columns and flesh out a search in a little bit more detail later in the workshop. Right now, go ahead and fill in columns A through C. Also, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. You could even unmute yourself and ask. I think we don't have a ton of people right now, so there's no worry about a wild crowd of people all talking at once.
And I'll just add, if you don't have a major research project going on right now, that's totally fine.
Oh, yeah.
You could just make up something that you might be interested in doing research on at some point in the future. This is just an exercise to get some practice. So just make sure you put down something so that we can continue to get the practice.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Diana. Okay. I think we'll just take about one more minute. Good. Just brainstorm something. You're not committed to this. We won't force you to write a thesis on this stuff. It's just a chance to give it a try and practice some of these skills.
Keith, if you're not able to get the content to show up in the document, you could just put it in chat and I'll paste it into the document for you.
One thing I'll say too, just for future reference, we can actually email you all a link to this Google document, so you'll be able to do this in the future when you perhaps have a more solid research topic that you're committed to, or just so you can refer to it in the future. So no worries about that, especially if you're having trouble accessing the Google document now. Okay. Okay, it looks like a lot of people have had a chance to go ahead and fill that in. Shall we go ahead and resume with the slides? Anybody need a little bit more time? Okay, okay. Sounds good. Diana, did you want to go ahead and share your screen then?
Yes, thank you. I'll take
Okay.
over.
Okay, go ahead, Diana.
All right. So thank you. I'm going to start sharing my screen now, and hopefully pick up where we left off. There we go.
All right.
So yes, thank you all for taking the time to begin filling in that information for our activity. We are going to come back to that activity and continue to build on some more information as we continue with this presentation. So if for some reason you were having trouble accessing it, don't worry about it. You could continue to work on it for the next 45 minutes. So now that Carrie has talked about how we define our research question and define the scope of the kinds of information that we're going to need to include in our literature review, the next step is to determine where we're actually going to search for the information that we need. Now, in the case of most academic and scholarly research, the kind of information that we need for literature reviews in the sciences is only available through subscriptions to the journals that publish the research articles. Now, WMU Library subscribes to many journals that and many databases that collect these journals together so that you can search them. And there are some databases of journal articles that don't require a subscription, that are open access. But as of right now, the majority of academic scientific information is still behind those subscription paywalls. So that means that in order to do a comprehensive literature review, and I'm stressing that word comprehensive, you'll need to use these subscription databases rather than rely only on those freely available open access research articles. We all wish that more material was available free and open access, but unfortunately that's just not the reality that we have right now. So when you are striving to be comprehensive in a project like a literature review, it is important to use these subscription resources. Now, there are two main types of databases that we all have access to. There are these discipline-specific databases, which are focused on a particular academic discipline, and interdisciplinary databases. Now, there are advantages to each, and most literature reviews will involve searching a combination of both discipline-specific and interdisciplinary databases. So some examples of discipline-specific databases include the ones up here on the screen: Engineering Village. Surprise, surprise, that's an engineering database. PsycInfo for psychology, PubMed, the major biomedical research database, SciFinder Scholar, or SciFinder Scholar N, as it's known now, for chemistry. And all of the different academic disciplines have some discipline-specific databases that we can use. But we also have access to interdisciplinary databases like Scopus or the various ProQuest databases, or iResearch, which is our main interface, which will search across many, many different databases that the WMU library subscribes to. Even Google Scholar is considered an interdisciplinary database because the information in it is not specific to any one discipline, but rather it transcends across many different areas. So we're going to go back into our activity in a minute, but first, I'm going to ask you all, or I'm going to show you rather, let me escape out of this full screen so I can show you. I'm going to go to the library's main webpage, and that is the link that is on the screen, or that is on this screen. And I think, Ed, were you able to put that in chat? Okay, yes. So that's up in chat, so you can follow along. The library's main page here, this is where you can, this is the interface that we recommend using to access, of course, all of the library's resources, whether they be interdisciplinary databases or interdisciplinary interfaces like Library Search right here on the main page, or some of the subject specialized databases. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to pay attention especially to where I'm clicking right now, because I'm going to have you all do this in a minute. On the main page, there's a link that says Find Databases. It's just after the main search bar for Library Search. So when I click on Find Databases, this takes us to an alphabetical listing of all of the databases that the WMU library subscribes to. In this case, 573 databases, which is a lot. And nobody wants to go through all of them. So what we recommend is that you sort the list by subject. So let's say, for example, you're doing research in psychology. You click where it says the all subjects pull down menu and you change it to psychology. And this will show you the databases which are most commonly used for people, students and faculty doing research in psychology. So what I'd like you all to do is to go to this page and select a subject area that relates to the research topic that you have previously entered into our worksheet, into this worksheet. So pick a subject area, or possibly multiple subject areas that relate in some way to your topic. And I want you to enter in 3 different databases. So you're going to do columns D, E, and F right now, and choose 3 databases that might be places where you would look for information on your topic. So just take like 2.5 minutes to do that. So again, what you're going to do is on the University Library's main page, this main page, and again, the link is in chat, click where it says Find Databases, and then change the pull-down menu from all subjects to your subject area, for example, chemistry. And then you can select from this list which databases you would include for your research. So again, just about 2 minutes to take a quick, just choose a few to start with. Okay, it looks like everybody's got, so most of you have something in there. So I'm going to go back to our slides. All right. Thanks for continuing along with the activity there. Now that we've chosen some databases where we can search for information, the next thing is to actually figure out what we're going to search for. That is, what are the actual words that we're going to enter into some of these databases? And that sounds very simple, very straightforward, and sometimes it actually is simple and straightforward. But again, I'm going to come back to that word comprehensive. The purpose of a literature review is to be comprehensive, not just to find one answer to a question, but to make sure that you have a solid understanding of the entire scope of information that is available on the topic. And that means that you often have to think creatively about what terms you're going to search for in order to be certain that you aren't missing some important and relevant information. So I like to think about search terms and keywords like hashtags on social media. I mean, if you think about search terms if you think about like you're searching for the hashtag on an Instagram post, but the author of the post has given the post a different hashtag, then it's not going to come up on your search. It's like if somebody posted a photo on Instagram and they gave it the tag dogs of Instagram, but somebody else posted a photo and they called it with the hashtag wiener dogs of Instagram. Well, the results that you get when you search for wiener dogs of Instagram are not going to be the same as the results that you'll get when you search for the hashtag dogs of Instagram. They're just different. So it's important to figure out what the terminology is that's being used to describe the information, whether the information is an Instagram post or if the information is an academic journal article. You need to figure out what is the right terminology that matches with the information that the author or the editors or the database providers have chosen to associate with each piece of information. One of the simplest ways is to actually just start with information you already have. That could be a textbook or an article that you've already read that describes some aspect of your topic. And you look for the words that the author is using to describe your topic. It's very common for authors of textbooks or journal articles to be using the appropriate terminology for their discipline. In some cases, that can change very quickly. For example, we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of research being done on trans people in the US, but also more broadly. But the terminology that is being used in the academic literature has evolved rapidly as our understanding of the psychology or what the education or what the social services related to trans people are. So understanding the words that the author of something that you have is using to describe the topic, that's number one. Another thing to look for are specialized thesauruses for your discipline. So for example, PubMed, that's the major biomedical database. They have what they call mesh terms or medical subject headings. Basically, these are just specific terms that every article in PubMed has been assigned, has been connected with. So even if you're searching for information, say, on heart attacks, PubMed will apply this subject heading myocardial infarction to all of those articles on heart attacks because that's a technical term for heart attack. So when you're searching for information in PubMed, you can search for heart attack, you can search for myocardial infarction. You might also want to search for concepts that are a bit broader, like cardiology more generally. Or you might want to search for concepts that are a bit more related to an aspect of your topic, like arrhythmia. And you can also just do a general web search. Use Google Scholar, even use Wikipedia. Just the whole point is to generate a wide variety of possible search terms so that you don't miss out on important information. And here's one thing that I cannot stress enough. Keep a list that is written down somewhere of what words you have come up with to search. It is much, much easier to be confident that you have found all of the relevant information for a comprehensive literature review if you can keep track of what terms you're searching and in which databases. Now, I do want to show you very quickly an example of author-supplied keywords that we can find in journal articles. If you look at this slide, on the bottom left, there is this red box. This shows you how in many of these academic journal articles, there will be subjects or keywords or descriptors. It doesn't matter what they're called, but the point is that these are words which have been identified either by the author of the article, by the editor, or in some cases in the databases by the editors of the databases as to what are these key terms that are associated with the article. These are especially useful because these are terms that experts have chosen to describe their work, and they're usually based on the standard terminology that's being used in the field. So if you can find keywords or subject headings or descriptors, again, either on the article itself or in the database section talking about the article, that can be a great opportunity to add search terms to your list. So now we're going to go back to our worksheet, our activity. And we're going to move on to the next column. I believe that's column G. And I'm going to ask you all to just take, again, about maybe 3 minutes, not very long, and just brainstorm as many different words or key possible search terms as you could think of that relate to your topic. They can be synonyms. They can be broad ideas that are like covering the whole broad concept of your topic. They could be focused just on a specific aspect of your topic. It's totally up to you, but brainstorm as many as you can in 3 minutes. Go. All right. Looks like we are pretty good there. I'm going to pass things off to Ed now, and he's going to talk about some of the different search techniques that we can use to actually apply these search terms.
All right, give me a moment here, pull my slides down. So hello, I'm Ed, I'm the Engineering and Applied Sciences Librarian. So you've learned about databases, you've learned about keywords. Now I want to talk about what to do with those keywords once you have them into a database interface. So there are some techniques for working with keywords within a database interface that involve something called Boolean logic and date limits and putting quotes around phrases. So let me talk a little bit about what these are. So most of us are used to searching in Google where we don't even have to think about how to put the keywords in. We just put them in and Google will give us back results that roughly match what we are interested in. When you're searching a library database, you have a lot more power at your fingertips, but it also means you have to be a little more careful about what you do with your keywords. So the first thing is that when you put your keywords in, you're going to want to put them in separate boxes. And I'm going to show you examples from 3 different databases that we've talked about earlier today. So this is an example from Engineering Village. I'm going to talk about ProQuest PsycInfo, and I'm going to talk about the Scopus database. So when you put keywords into a database, usually you're going to have 1 or more boxes. And your keywords in these boxes can be linked using the words and, or, and not. Okay, so Boolean logic basically means overlapping concepts. So in this case, aerodynamic is in the first box. So that's the first concept I'm looking for in this engineering database. I want also the concepts drag or resistance to show up. Now, drag and or resistance are basically sort of synonyms. So I have the word or between them because I want one or the other, but I don't necessarily need both. And I'm using and because I'm saying I want to find this concept and I want these two. And then there's another and in the drop down here. I also want the concept of vortex generator. Now note that I put vortex generator in quotes. When you're looking for a phrase or a concept that is 2 or more words, you want to put it in quotation marks to search for it as a unit, as opposed to 2 separate words. Okay, and most databases are going to have a drop down where you can select and, or, and not. And the default between boxes will usually be and. Now, if I take you over to PsycInfo, here's an example of a search in the PsycInfo database, which is the best psychology database. And again, you'll see the and, or, and not show up in the drop down. So for my topic here of the treatment of depression or anxiety using mindfulness or meditation methods, right? Depression or anxiety, I'm kind of calling those synonyms for now. They're not exactly synonyms, but for now I'm saying I want one or the other. In the second box, treatment or therapy or intervention. And then in the third box, meditation or mindfulness or zazen or vipassana. Zazen and Vipassana are different meditation types. So again, you can link things with and or. Now, if you wanted to not something out, then you can use not in the drop down. And that basically would say, I want articles on depression or anxiety and treatment of it, but I do not want articles that talk about meditation, mindfulness, or the other 2 concepts. And then finally, the Scopus database, which was also mentioned earlier and is the multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary database. You're going to see the same and, or, and not in this database in the dropdowns. And again, separate concepts in separate boxes. Okay. And then finally, date limits. Most databases are going to give you option to limit things by date. And so when Carrie mentioned earlier that you were probably at the beginning of your project or your literature review, you're going to want to set a limit of how far back you want to search for your literature. You can set that date limit in your database and then run the search. Okay. So that you can search for different time frames. Okay. So that kind of helps you narrow down your searches. As you are searching, you're going to want to keep track of the databases that you've searched, the keywords that you've used, whatever limits or filters that you've used, and even search strategies, what Boolean search strategies. So we suggest keeping some kind of research log, either in a online document like a Google document or Microsoft Word, or in a notebook. As you search and you collect your references, so if I go to PsycInfo and I run this search, as you run your searches, you're going to want to have some way of collecting the references. Okay, let me run to Scopus here. You're going to want a way of collecting the references or citations that you've searched so that you can review them to see if they are relevant to your project. Okay, so most databases, when you get search results, you'll have an opportunity to export references or download them. So usually you can export a list of references from a database as an Excel file or a CSV file, or you can download it as something called an RIS file, which is a bibliographic citation format file. Okay, so you're going to want to keep track of the references that you want to read. To do this, you probably want to take the time to learn how to use a bibliographic management software. Hold on, I'm going to put a couple links in the chat box. So there are two main free bibliographic software packages out there, Mendeley and Zotero. And we do library workshops on these two softwares. There's one called PaperPile, which works with Google Docs. That costs, I think, $2 or $3 a month. And then there's EndNote, which is a more expensive bibliographic software that's been around for about 25 years. And EndNote costs about $115 for a student account. But we offer workshops for Mendeley and Zotero, and the links that I put in the chat box are to where you can see and register for the workshops that we're offering this spring. So I highly recommend you learn how to use this software, because not only can you use it to keep track of your citations, you can use it to actually put in text citations in your documents and create bibliographies in your writing projects. Now, as you look through the list of results that you get from all these different databases, you're not going to want to read everything. You will be totally overwhelmed if you try that. So you have to decide what is relevant to your project and what is not relevant. And so you're going to have to decide what inclusionary or exclusionary criteria to use to separate out the articles that are not relevant from the articles that are. And this could be the methodology of the article, like maybe you don't need to read about certain methodologies, but there are others that you do need to read about. Say you're doing ethnographic research in South America. Maybe you don't want to read about articles that are not ethnographic studies. Maybe you want to read only about ethnographic studies in South America. You might want to look at research results. What results would be relevant to what you're trying to do for your project? You may also want to look at the quality of the journal that the articles have been published in. So you may want to look at journal ranking. And there's a database we have, Scopus, where you can look at how highly ranked a journal is. And you can use that as it's kind of an indicator of quality. A higher ranked journal in a field is a higher quality journal. So you want to see what's relevant and ignore the articles that are not relevant for your particular study. You may want to find famous papers or key papers, highly cited papers in your discipline. Your professor or your advisor may suggest some famous papers that you can read. You may want to look at who cites those papers. You can use the Scopus database and Google Scholar to search for a paper and then see who has cited or used that paper in their own reference list. And this will give you an idea of related studies. Knowing how many times a paper has been cited also gives you a sense of quality. How well respected is that paper? One thing to keep in mind also is don't just depend on what you find from the databases that you're searching in. When you look at the papers and you're reading the papers, look at the reference lists of the papers that you read. Usually there will be several references in the reference list that you might not have found in the databases you search, and that might be very useful for your research project. The reference list is like a freely supplied database search. So make sure you look at the reference list and pull out important papers from there. You can also track well-known researchers. What we'd like to have you do right now is do some searching practice, okay, in a database. What we'd like you to do, and I'm going to paste this in the chat box again, have you go to the worksheet, and we want you to pick one of the databases that you chose earlier and try to search on some keywords relating to your project. Find one really good paper that seems relevant. Post the title of the paper in the column in the worksheet that relates to seed paper reference. So go to column H. Try using the and, or, and not limits and date limits if you want. And then finally see if you can access the full text of the papers. If you're having trouble or you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or post your question into the chat box and we can help you out. So why don't you go ahead, we've got about 15 minutes, so maybe we'll give you about 8 or 10 minutes here. Maybe take about 4 more minutes. And again, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or post a question in the chat box. Yeah, looks like a bunch of you have found some very interesting articles. Yep. Try accessing full text. See if you can do that. One more minute. All right. I'm going to stop you there. I have one more slide. So when you go through the search process and you search the databases, you're going to find lots of articles, and you're going to have to winnow through them to find what's relevant, what falls within the date range of articles you want to read or sources you want to read. Then you might wonder, when are you actually done? Because sometimes it feels like the more we search, the more we find, and we never quite find everything. But there's a couple rules of thumb that you can use to help you get a sense of whether you've really done about as comprehensive a search as you can. And the first thing is, how many databases did you search? You don't want to just search one database. You really want to search enough relevant databases to make sure that you've covered the ground, because not every database covers everything. So most databases overlap a little bit, particularly in the same subject area. So you may want to make sure you've searched all the relevant databases, a couple interdisciplinary ones and whatever the main disciplinary ones are. The next rule of thumb is if you start seeing the same references again and again as you're searching different databases, and using different keywords, that tells you two things. That tells you first that you may have searched all the relevant places and you're not going to find anything new. It also tells you that you may need to change your keywords, okay, to find additional things, and that the keywords you've used, you've pretty much run dry with. But if you keep seeing the same references over and over again, that's a good sign that you've probably done a pretty comprehensive search. However, keep in mind that if you end your searching today and you write your literature review 3 months from now or 6 months from now, that new articles may have been published in that intervening time. And you want to make sure you keep track of those and read those. Most databases allow you to set up what's called a citation alert. Usually you have to create an account in the database to do this, but then you could put in your email address and give it a search and tell it to send you the results of that search once a week or once a month. What this does is enables your search to be run against any new references that have been input into the database. And if any new articles or books or other citations come up, you can get those results in your email. So that enables you to kind of keep track of what's happening in your research discipline. And Diana just posted a link in the chat. We do have a workshop coming up called Keeping Current with Scholarly Literature in Your Field. And the registration link is right there in the chat box. So feel free to also attend that workshop as well. And so that's the end of our presentation today. These are our names and contact information and the research areas that we focus in. So please consider getting in touch with the relevant librarian. If you're in a discipline that's not represented here, let us know and we could tell you who the librarian is for that area. And Diana posted this information in the chat box as well. So I have one more thing to ask you to do. And that is to take our survey. So I'm going to put this little survey. We like to get feedback on these workshops. Put our survey link in the chat box. Please take the survey to let us know what you think of this workshop and give us any advice about improving it. And thank you for coming today. We really appreciate you taking the time.
I'm going to stop the recording now. Recording.